can you have such different views of the universe, different views of origins? Well, let me ask you this question. Whether you're a creationist or an evolutionist, a Christian or a non-Christian, do we all have the same Earth or a different Earth? You tell me. Same Earth, okay. Do we have the same fossils or different fossils? Same. Do we have the same animals? Real animals, not mundane things like deer and bear and so on. I mean, you know, real animals like kangaroos. Do we all have the same animals? Do we all see the same dinosaurs? Yes. Do we all see the same animal death? Yes. Do we all see the same human death and experience the same human death? Yes. Hey, what does that mean? If we all have the same fossils, the same canyons, the same rock layers, the same animals, the same plants, the same... Do you know what that means? Do we all have the same facts or different facts? Oh, we have the same facts. You know, some people have the wrong idea about creation versus evolution. They say, oh, evolutionists have all these facts, and as Christians, if we're going to win the battle, we've got to have more facts than them, so we've got to try to build up our facts so that we can say we've got the most and we win. That's how some people look on the argument. It's not like that at all. Because in reality, it's a battle over the same evidence. It's a battle over the same facts. Creationists and evolutionists are trying to explain the same facts in the context of history. What happened in the past to cause fossils? What happened in the past to produce the canyons? What happened in the past to bring people here? What happened in the past to cause all these different people groups? What happened in the past to cause death and suffering and disease in this world? How do we connect the past to the present? And you know, in an ultimate sense, there are only two ways of doing this. Either there's one who knows everything, who's always been there, who doesn't tell a lie, who we can trust, someone who is a witness from the past, whose word we can trust, or man determines truth. And you see, on the basis of your two different starting points, you really put on two different pairs of glasses. See, if you have on biblical glasses, here's how we should understand it. That revelation is the key to the past. The Bible is a revelation from God that says, here's what happened in the past, and therefore knowing what happened in the past, we can explain the present. Those who start with man say, well, we're starting with the present and we're trying to go into the past and say, here's what happened. And so how did the universe get here? Well, we believe there was a big bang and so on. And so on the basis of those two different starting points, we all look at the evidence and actually we have two different interpretations of the same evidence. Let me give you real briefly what I'm saying here. You start from here, in the beginning God, okay? So life must be a result of an intelligence, all right? So when you look at DNA, that molecule of heredity that makes up our genes, our chromosomes and so on, our DNA is actually an information system. There's actually a code, like a language, that reads books of information, and scientists know codes only come from an intelligence and information only comes from information. Nobody's ever seen a code or information arise from matter just by natural processes, which really means in the beginning God makes sense of this, not in the beginning the cosmos. Isn't it exciting being a Christian, by the way? You see, because it does make sense of that when you start with the Bible. When you start down here, death came after sin and there was a global flood, and you say, oh, when I look at fossils and I look at rock layers then, oh yeah, when I look at those layers, it's more consistent with a catastrophic global flood, after Adam sinned, rather than millions of years. When they start down here, they say, oh no, those layers were laid down over millions of years. So when you look at those layers, I suggest to you, actually, the evidence is more consistent with being laid down catastrophically. You're going to do that in some of the sessions here. When I start here, God says he made the first man, Adam. We're all descendants of Adam and Eve in the event of the Tower of Babel. Oh, that makes sense of all the people groups. What's interesting is the Human Genome Project, when they mapped the human genome, you know what they said? Oh, guess what? We mapped the human genome looking at genes from humans around the world, and there's only one race. That was a surprise, wasn't it? Because if the Bible's right and we're all descendants of Adam and Eve, how many races are there? Only one, exactly. But over here, oh no, man came from ape-like ancestors, woman from an ape woman and so on, and so we have different races that evolved at different levels. That's what Darwin taught. And I suggest to you the evidence is inconsistent with us, with humans arising from ape-like ancestors and different races. When you look at the variation in dogs here, over here, oh, the Bible says God made kinds of animals and plants after their kind. The implication is they would reproduce their own kind. Over here, I know one kind changes into another over millions of years. When you look at these changes that are talked about now in the public school textbooks, they say, oh, the little changes, and when you talk about natural selection, that's evidence for molecules to man evolution. Actually, when you look at those little changes and you look at dogs, it's evidence that dogs change into dogs. You know, how do you get dingoes, wolves, coyotes, Great Dane, Little Chihuahua, St. Bernard, jackal, foxes? Well, what were they? Dogs. What are they? Dogs. What will they be? Dogs. Is that evolution? Well, it's actually dogs. You start with dogs, you end with dogs. Now, look at that. Do you see what I mean? We've got totally different interpretations of the same evidence because we have different starting points. Now, you might say, okay, well, can we use science to determine which starting position is the correct one? Actually, creationists and evolutionists not only have the same facts, you know what else shocks them? I tell them, not only do we have the same facts, we have the same science. If you're talking about observational science. Now, what do I mean by that? You ever looked up the dictionary definition of science? You look it up. The basic meaning of science is what? Knowledge. Now, here's what you've got to understand. It doesn't say there, science means knowledge, but you can't have God. It doesn't say that. The word science means knowledge. Now, you can have knowledge about the present, and you know what we call that? Observational science. Observational science is what I taught in school. I taught students to mix things together in a laboratory and taught them physics, and they experimented with metals and electronics. By the way, that's the sort of science that builds space shuttles and builds vehicles like motorbikes and also computers and cell phones, and put the rover up on Mars. Observational science. That's gaining knowledge of the present to build our technology. And it's great and it's awesome, and that's why we can have cameras here and microphones and computers. That's observational science. Do you love observational science? Great, isn't it? Gives us our technology. But when the scientists using the rover look at a rock on Mars and try to connect the rock to the past and try to interpret it in terms of millions of years, they've stepped outside of observational science. Now they're trying to gain knowledge about the past, which we call historical science. And the problem with historical science is you're now trying to talk about something that happened when you weren't there and didn't see it. That's very different to observational science, which is what you do in the present. And when you're talking about historical science, you know what you're really talking about? Well, there's another word you can look up in the dictionary. It's called faith. And when you look up the word faith, it talks about a firm belief in something for which there is no proof. See, when it comes to the past, think about this. For Christians who believe that God made Adam and Eve, can we scientifically prove God made Adam and Eve? And the answer is no, because it happened in the past. You can't ultimately prove it. Can those who believe in the Big Bang prove that that happened? No. Why? Well, for them, it happened in the past. Can they prove that reptiles turned into birds? No, because they say that happened in the past. See, we've only got the present. And so, when you're looking at these two views that are so different, you're looking at whole systems of belief to explain every aspect of reality. And by the way, you know what that's really called? What's that word? Religion. If you look at the definition of religion, here's one of the basic definitions: a cause, a principle, a system of beliefs held to with ardor and faith. And here's what I want us to understand. Creationists and evolutionists both have what we call scientific aspects in the sense of observational science, but we both have faith aspects and religious aspects as well. So it's not the Bible versus science. It's those who believe that the Bible is a revelation from God, as it teaches that it is, and those who believe man's views of the past is two beliefs that interpret the same evidence, and we use the same observational science.